and the intellect into the guide in a life of avodah and action. Very interesting. I'm not sure I understand it exactly, but I'll tell you what I think he's trying to say. You know, if you have, let's say, for example, very hot water, you can't drink the hot water the way it is, so you put in some cold water. What you have is warm water, which is neither hot nor cold. It might be, easy to drink, but it's like Yiddish, nicht dahin, nicht daher. It's not here, it's not there. It's not hot, it's not cold, it's warm, it's tepid. And if you're cold and you're in the mood of a hot drink, a warm drink won't do the trick. If you're very hot and you're looking for something cold, again, a warm drink won't satisfy you. We have intellect, we're rational beings. And a rational being, someone who's very much lives with the concept of, I don't do anything unless I think about it first, I understand it first. He's cold. You can't get him excited about things because it takes him time to first decide whether it's worthy of being excited. And once he makes the decision to be excited, it's not real excitement at all. It's almost like the joke, let's make a spontaneous dance. Well, if 8:06 there's a spontaneous dance, then it's not spontaneous. It's already planned out. So intellect and excitement are two opposites. Excitement is great because there's enthusiasm, there's warmth, there's spontaneity, there's real life. The problem with excitement is that you get excited about many things which are not worthy about getting excited about at all. In other words, you might be excited about, you heard something, you saw something, you feel something, and then upon a moment's reflection, you say, this is silly, or this is actually not healthy. So, but there is qualities of excitement which you can't get from intellect. So the divine service, especially of a chassid, is to try to put these two worlds together. And it won't be the solution, the conclusion of merging of these worlds won't be tepid. It's not going to be warm water, which is not satisfying you. Somehow by putting excitement and into intellect into excitement, what will happen is the intellect will grow and the excitement will grow. What happens when you put excitement into thought, into intellect? So he says it gets translated nehefachas l'she'ifa. I'm reading the English. The impetuousness becomes transformed into a longing. In other words, let's say, for example, my mind, and again, everything I'm saying is I'm offering it as a possibility. Let's say my mind tells me that doing mitzvahs is good. It's proper. It's logically imperative that as a Jew, I connect to God. It's beautiful, but it's cold. So my davening, my learning, my tzedakah, it's all cold. What happens if I get excited? I'm excited to serve Hashem. That's great, but I might not follow the laws exactly in my excitement. It's like someone who runs to shul because he's so excited about running into shul, but in the meantime, he pushes people on his way in because he's so excited. But he's breaking the law by not being a mensch and by not treating people with respect and dignity because he's so excited. Well, what happens if your mind tells you to go to shul And you could put the excitement of going to shul, davening, into that. So now what happens is you have a longing, a yearning to go to shul. It's not merely that the mind tells you it is a good thing to do and that's what you should do, but there's an attraction to going to shul, which has an emotional component. But that emotional component is actually encased in the idea of intellect. And of course, this then is brought further down into the entire life of serving Hashem through action, that we do it based on the way we understand, we do it with excitement, and therefore the intellect gets a new dimension, which again, I'm just using his language, which is transformed into a longing. Okay, I'm not sure if that's exactly what he meant, but it is a very profound thought about these two worlds. We yesterday finished reading chapter 5. Let's go over some of the ideas of chapter 5. I know in Iggeret Hateshuvah, we were talking about that there are two aspects in which we could sort of define or explain the relationship between God, who gives us the soul, and the way the soul is in the body. There's one aspect of it which is likened to God's breath. So God blew into us a soul, which is his innermost being. And as God is expressed through the 10 Sfirot, starting from Chochmah, ending in Malchus, so too is found in the Neshama. And then there's another aspect of the Neshama, which we liken to a rope that has 613 strands, each strand being a mitzvah, and that connects us to our Creator, to Hashem Yisbarach. These two concepts have some very practical applications. In the case of the aspect of the neshama, which is being blown into the person, here a sin will create a barrier to the extent that the breath will not be felt by the person who's supposed to be receiving the breath. And therefore, when we talk about, God forbid, there are certain sins where the punishment is chorus, excision of the soul, or of death from heaven, that basically means that there's a type of a life energy which ordinarily would have been God breathing into him, almost like being resuscitated with the breath of God. But through the sin, the breath cannot reach, and therefore the person will die at a premature age. When we talk about when we talk about this idea of this lack of life, the question is, why doesn't it happen immediately? If there's a blockage between the breath and the recipient, and the answer is there's still some leftover or residue life, and therefore that could go until 50 or 60. And yesterday I gave the example of perhaps looking at flowers cut off. Then there are other sins which do not affect the breath. Rather, it affects the idea of the strands, the mitzvah. When there's a sin, one of the strands, which overall means that there is a weakening of the connection because 613 strands is stronger than 610. But because the strands are so, in a sense, slender, it's possible that overall the connection remains. And yeah, of course, you have to do teshuvah. Let's talk about this today in a slightly different form based on the teachings of the Rebbe. When we use the expression of inner and outer in the physical world, it's incredibly in contrast to inner and outer in the Hasidic mystical world. The contrast between them is enormous. If we talk about inside the house, outside the house, something inside of your wallet, something outside of your wallet, I mean, the definitions are very clear. In the mystical world, when we talk about inner and outer, first of all, if it's a spiritual world, it's a non-material world. We have to understand, what does that mean, inner and outer? So let's give a couple of examples, okay? There's me thinking, me speaking. When I am involved with thought, it is inner. When I reveal my thought to you, that's outer. It's a completely different concept. It's a question more of revelation. Concealment is inner, revelation is outer. Okay? Let me give another example of inner and outer. I am revealing, I am speaking to you. If I speak to you with passion, with excitement, then that's the inner part of speech. If I'm merely repeating words, that's the external part of speech. Again, the inner and outer is a degree of revelation. Speech is revelation. So you could read my words. Or you could, so imagine a person who's talking and it's being translated or being recorded into letters and the words and paragraphs, etc. If you hear those words, you will hear the neshama of it. You will hear the soul. If you just read it, you might be missing the entire point of the words. Let's say it's action. Okay, I am weaving a basket. The external part of action is you could see me weaving. The inner part of that action is the enjoyment I'm getting. You don't see that enjoyment. You just see me weaving. But if you were able to see within me, so though I am revealing what I am doing, you actually don't know the soul of what I am doing. You understand? So it is so, I'll use the word beautiful. It makes you, it expands the horizon of inner and outer. Inner and outer doesn't mean before what's outside the wall, inside or inside the house. Inner and outer each time is referring to a deeper form of revelation. So the more external the revelation, and again, let me remind you, speech in comparison to thought, right? Action in terms of emotion that goes into the action. So, for example, if you were to see the person singing with a big smile while he's weaving, you would get a very different picture than if you just looked from the distance and you saw someone weaving. When we talk about the neshama, we only have one neshama. That's obvious. We have one body, and we have one neshama that goes into that one body, which is given, and both of them were created by the one God. And we connect to this oneness through the one Torah, etc., etc. But when we talk about this one neshama, sometimes you hear the expression in English, there are layers. But when you think about layers, again, most of us conjure up a picture of a 7-layer cake or something that you might have seen in a science class, different layers of earth. There are different dimensions. There are levels within levels. There's always an outer to an inner. So when we talk about an inner connection, the pneumius, which is inner, a more pneumiistic connection, an inner connection of the soul from God, we will express that most eloquently by pointing out it is the breath of God. Now, this level of innermost means it has to constantly be breathed. So we might be 69 years old, living 69 years on earth, and there's a level of soul, of life that's within us, which is constantly being blown into us. Then there's a level of soul or a dimension of the soul, which doesn't always have to be blown into us. It was already inside of us. It merely has to be maintained. So I hope I'm not confusing you. So think for a moment the following. God renews creation every day. We already learned about this in the Holy Tanya, right? That when God spoke, let there be, he's still speaking, let there be. And were he not to say it right now, were he not to think it right now, what would happen to creation? It would cease to be. There would be nothing. Yet, is there a difference between the moment of creation and now creation? In other words, on the fourth day of creation, God created the sun, or perhaps in a more general way, when God created heaven and earth, right? He created the sun. Now it's 5,700 and change later. God is still creating the sun. Is there a difference between the way God first created the sun, initially brought forth into creation the sun, and now? And Chassidus explains yes. Now, I don't claim to understand this completely, but a touch of it. When God created in the 6 days of creation, it was the creation of yesh, of a something, me'ayin, from a nothingness. And already we've spoken many times, the nothingness or the non-existence is something that we truly do not understand, because when we say nothing is here, there is something, it's just that it's undefinable or it's not tangible. But true nothingness, not even an atom, is something which is beyond creation. So when Hashem created the sun, it was a creation yesh, It became an existence, may ayin, from a complete non-existence. Now that Hashem is creating the sun, what he's doing is he's renewing the creation. Were he not to renew the creation, again, it would turn and revert back to nothingness. But it's not the same form of creation as it was in the beginning. In the beginning, there was no form, and Hashem created the form, as well as the inside of the form. Now Hashem renews that. Lahavdil, to make a separation almost between the real and the silly. Okay, we're living today now in this pandemic. So you take out a book from the library. So you do it on you put it into your iPhone. It expires in 21 days or something like that. So you have some type of information in your iPhone, and you're able to access it by pressing Libby or whatever it might be, or Kindle, and you can read the book. 21 days later, it's not there. It's like it's a very interesting concept. We all know that there are food items, which expire. You shouldn't sell it or eat it after a certain day, but it doesn't just turn into zero. But we have in electronics today, and probably other things as well, that when it expires, there's no residue. It just disappears. Yet there's clearly a difference between when you first downloaded it and when you renew it. So it's 20 days, you're still in the middle of the book, so you renew the book in your iPhone. That's not downloading it again. It's renewing what's there. And again, I know it's a very mundane, almost a foolish example, but I'm only doing it for a reference. When Hashem is constantly renewing creation, there is a form, there is a dimension, there is a purpose. Every blade of grass exists for a reason. He created that blade of grass out of nothingness. And since creation, he renews that form. Were he not to renew that form immediately or consistently, it would not stay. But it's still not the same thing as the first moment. So there's an element of the neshama which is being renewed every moment through the breath of God. And hence, if there's a type of a sin, which the punishment is chorus, cutting off, what happens is the breath of God cannot reach, as if to say, and therefore there's going to be a practical application of this interference. What's the practical application of it? The body will stop living after a certain time. But then there are aspects of the neshama which are already created, and in a sense, they have an existence on its own. Not when I say on its own, in other words, that they're given some type of a permanence or a significance. And in this case, it's likened not to the breath, but to the strands, the rope that has 613. So what I'm attempting to do is to bring a little bit of a clarity how it's possible to have 2, 3, many things simultaneously happening. Just like I told you, for example, when we're thinking about when we're sharing a conversation or sharing a learned thought, there's wisdom in that thought. but that's hidden. What's there is only what you hear. There's emotion in that speech. So again, it's hidden, it's within. You don't see it. Though there is an aspect which you do see, which you do feel, which is affecting you. There's always a pnimius and a chitzonius. The Rebbe points this out, for example, when it comes to the Holy Shabbos. Every week, God, he rests, and again, in italics, every seventh day, creation is renewed on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Shabbos, he rests. And he gives us the commandment to rest as well. What does that mean? He rests. The world is functioning perfectly well. There is no change in the laws of nature. So if he's keeping creation, nourishing it, sustaining it, strengthening it on Thursday, he seems to be doing the same thing on Shabbos. What does it mean he rests on Shabbos? And of course, that question is just bumped up to the first Shabbos. What does that mean he rested? So I don't want to get into a discussion about Shabbos right now, merely to conclude today's class with one of the teachings. What does it mean he rests on Shabbos? He rests on Shabbos from the inner part of creation, not the external part. So for example, just as an example Chassidus gives, let's say you're working on a project, okay? And while you're working on the project, you have no time to actually step back and appreciate what you did. However, when you finish the project, now suddenly it's not you stopped working with your hands. Suddenly the appreciation of what you've accomplished becomes profound. So there's a pleasure and an enjoyment of what you did that comes to the forefront. Now, in a sense, why did you do this project to begin with? Because it was going to bring you gratification. There would be a sense of enjoyment. However, during the time you were working, that enjoyment that initiated the project was completely hidden, concealed. In fact, you're very tired or you're very involved. You can't even have an appreciation of a good meal because you're so involved with this thing. But when you finish it, suddenly what motivated you, the enjoyment that you pictured and you anticipated becomes revealed. So the inner gets elevated, or in this case, the inner becomes revealed, but to who? Not to someone who's looking at the project. All he sees is a completed project. But the person who finished the project is now at rest. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a reason, obviously, for creation, as if to say, as to use the language of man, during the 6 days he was working on this project. And on Shabbos, which is a spiritual day, a day of holiness, now he could have pleasure to see what he has accomplished. So there's a restfulness where he's not working anymore. There's rather an enjoyment. But the external part remains. It's the inner that becomes revealed. So the timing of his action. So this is a very, again, to repeat one more time, there's an aspect of the neshama which is breath. There's an aspect of the neshama which is like a rope. And we still have occasion to talk that there are 2 levels of this rope. There's one level where the neshama, which is likened to a rope of 613 strands, has an upper part and a lower part. And then there's an aspect of this rope where the neshama in the body is considered the head. In other words, not that it's there's an upper and a lower, but the way the neshama is inside of you is already considered the higher aspect of neshama. Okay, tomorrow, God willing, we will start chapter 6. Good day, everyone. Those of you that will join us at noon, we'll be discussing the mitzvah of making Kiddush Friday night. Okay, shalom, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.